Well, let's check this one out then, because as I say, I didn't even know that there was a boycott with Zenless Zone Zero. I know there's been some issues going on with voice actors and people wanting to boycott Genshin. Or is this talking about the fact that people were on about boycotting Genshin, but Zenless made insane amounts of money anyway, so Hoyo are still going to be pocketing that cash. Let's see what she's got to say. Melanie Mac Go Boom. Should check her out. I haven't seen any of her videos, but let's drop a preemptive sub and check out this content then, shall we? Let's see what the issue is.
Eastern game developer Hoyo has had a call for boycott for whitewashing and...
Okay, so we are talking about Natlan then. We are talking about Natlan. Yeah, as I said, a lot of the people who were involved in that boycott were just going to go and play Star Rail anyway and act like they were doing something, you know? It's just like, we'll stop putting money in the left hand and we'll put money in the right hand and pretend that we're being like, you know, we're doing something, man. We're bringing down Hoyo.
Cultural appropriation.
They're going to change things, promise.
In their games, like, namely, Genshin Impact. However, this has not gone anywhere. People are learning that, maybe these activists on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, aren't real. They don't.
Yeah, let's face it. There was probably a very... I genuinely don't think that most people will even stop playing a game over things like this. You know? Man, her tattoos are awesome. I just noticed that. Is that supposed to be Lara Croft there? Dude, that is an awesome tattoo. Just had to stop for a second then. You guys can see that very well. That is a really cool tattoo, that is. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, majority of the people who do end up having issues with video games anyway usually tend to have a major issue with a game that they're really passionate about. And usually, if unless it's like a really fundamental gameplay flaw, if it's usually something going on in the background, they'll continue to play the game anyway. Especially the people who are most vocal about it. They seem to be the ones who just continue playing also. And we just see that these boycotts just don't work. And I think it's because most of the people shouting about it are not playing the game anyway. You know, there's a small minority that will probably stop playing the game. Then there's a larger minority that are playing the game and are shouting about it. And then the majority of them don't even play the game. I know I'm totally pulling that out my ass, but I think it's the truth, you know, especially when it comes from Twitter anyway. Perpetually annoyed, upset and offended people are just finding the next thing that they can shout and scream about.
Don't reflect real life, you know, maybe these queerdos and woke activists...
It was gone on Voliga. They didn't even stop playing Genshin. True.
...are just on the internet and shouldn't be pandered to. So, let's go ahead and dive into this story today. So, here you have their change.org petition to stop cultural appropriation by whitewashing in MiHoYo games. Now, apparently...
See, like, obviously the whitewashing situation, whatever. I understand that people want representation in video games and stuff, even though you're just not going to get it from MiHoYo. The idea that video games should stop cultural appropriation, to me, is just such a stupid idea that we wouldn't have any creative works if you wasn't able to take inspiration from cultures, from history, from individuals, from groups. You know, the idea that you should stop culturally appropriate, even though I just hate the term anyway, but stop taking inspiration from cultures of the past, cultures of the present, create your own fantasy world is just ridiculous. It's such an asshole approach at things, in my opinion.
This is even
like,
some English Genshin Impact English voice actors are also accusing the game of whitewashing and racism.
Well, they are going to do that, aren't they, at the end of the day? Because a lot of these people, especially Western English voice actors, are going to be working in a lot of Western games as well. And that's the groupthink nowadays, isn't it? And if they kind of go against the groupthink, they're going to be afraid that they're not going to get work. Some of them might genuinely believe this, but there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to want to say what they really think because of the fear of scaring the Western audience that's going to be mad about it, even though, let's face it, it's a very small audience. It's going to be journals and corporations that are more likely going to have an issue with it. It's all just so boring now, really.
Taking inspiration from other cultures, but whitewashing it. So they started this. They're calling out a couple different characters.
I like as well how they say whitewashing it when it's a Chinese game, you know? Who says that the characters are even white? I understand that they're light-skinned, but why is the default? Well, they're white, you know? What? You know, they're based on anime. Are we saying that all anime characters are white? You know? And I'm not saying there's some aren't, because obviously there's, you know, there's different animes that are set all over the world, and some that are obviously in fantasy worlds, and some that it's never actually specified. But, like, I just think that's such a dumb point to come from, as well as if they're just white. It's they're light-skinned, but they're not white.
Characters from Genshin Impact as examples, and they, through this boycott, which they do have over 100,000 signatures, they want the solution for Hoyo to engage with indigenous cultural consultants.
See, that as well, the idea that they have to do that, like, who says that that's the case? Because, so, all right then, if a game's based on something in Europe, they have to consult with European, I don't know, European representation to be inspired by, you know, oh, you want to make a fantasy game that's got knights in it? Oh, you want to make a game that's got maybe like, you know, pixies and maybe like Celtic lore in it? Oh, Germanic lore? Oh, you ain't allowed to unless you speak to some representation. It's like, come on, nobody says that. So, like, why is it that needs to be in any other culture, even if it's an underrepresented culture? Like, the idea that it's maybe getting some representation anyway, isn't that a good thing? Oh, it's not the right kind of representation. It's like, it's tiring, isn't it?
They want them to get Sweet Baby inked. Revise existing content to ensure accurate representation. Commit to creating...
If it was going to be accurate representation, it wouldn't be fantasy at the end of the day, you know? Right? Like, okay, all right, this fantasy world's based on Great Britain in the 11th century, but the dude shoots fire out of his hands. Well, actually, we can't do that, because I don't remember anybody running around in 11th century, 10th century Great Britain shooting fire out of their hands, so it's not accurate, so we're going to have to remove that, right? Change it to rocks. He can throw some rocks, maybe, and he's got a bronze sword or an iron sword, potentially. Like, come on, man.
Diverse and inclusive characters.
Way to make stuff boring.
I'm so sick of all these DEI characters. Diversity for the sake of diversity. We've seen this ruin games in the West, namely, like crazy. So can we just stop with this crap? But anyway, as reported by Niche Gamer here,
it won't stop until these companies understand that it's costing them more money than what it's worth. And I think hopefully that's starting to happen, because you're seeing a lot of these projects sinking and failing now, and they're not making the money. So once that starts to happen regularly, they'll stop. Because at the minute, the people who are trying to continually push these subject matters, they get it's profitable, you know? It's like the anti-woke sort of content creation as well. It's profitable. So, of course, people are going to continue to do it because it's going to make the money. Not everybody, you know, but a lot of people's anger is used for small groups of people to make money. And until these companies just totally go, you know what, we're not going to listen to this anymore, it won't go away.
The Hoyoverse boycott fails miserably. Zenless Zone Zero earns nearly $100 million. All right, so which
is insane numbers. Like, just got to say that. Shout out to Zenless as well. Insanely impressive launch, isn't he? Really, really successful. And I admit, I think it's a good game as well. I do. I like the game. Although it's not my favourite gacha game, I definitely think it is a very good game. Well, a very good game. It's been a very good launch. It's a very fun game. That's what I should say. I don't think it's a very good game. I said before, I reckon it's like kind of a 6 out of 10. It's an okay game. It's very fun, though. That's what I should be saying.
Ongoing boycott against Hoyoverse. The developer behind Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Zenless Zone Zero has failed spectacularly, as Zenless Zone Zero raked nearly $100 million in July alone, right after launch. I mean, that's a huge launch. $100 million.
Mission failed, boys. We'll get them next time.
The boycott organizers, through a change.org petition, accuse Hoyoverse of cultural appropriation and whitewashing. The petition, which currently has over 104,000 signatures, accused their games.
And when you think about it, in the grand scheme of things of the amount of people that play Genshin and Hoyoverse games, that's a drop in the ocean. And out of that 104,000 people that have signed that, how many do you reckon have ever touched a Hoyoverse game? You know, I bet I wouldn't be surprised if it's anywhere between 30 to 60% of the people who've signed that have never even touched a Hoyoverse game. let alone play Genshin Impact, to the point where it's annoying them that it's not representing something they care about in the video game, because they don't even care about the video games.
Of cultural appropriation and whitewashing, while also demanding the developer commit to accurate representation of all cultures. Why can't games just be fun?
Right.
Especially in these universes, they're making up their own universes. This is theirs.
So like, if Genshin do a really heavily based American culture, right, and it's do they have to have a few 400-pound characters? It's like those banners are going to do really well, aren't they?
So it's not.
It's got to be
real.
accurate. Come on.
It's not them falsely
Shout out to my American
representing
friends.
a culture. It's them making their own. Let them make it how they want to make it. So, in particular, the many characters from Sumeru and Natlin in Genshin Impact, and from Penacony in Honkai Star Rail, are all clearly white or only lightly tanned at best, with the exception of some enemies.
Again, though, in my eyes, that's kind of like that's in your own bubble thing to say that they're clearly white. Who says that? You know, they're obviously light skinned, but who says they're white when it's coming from a Chinese developer and a genre that's based on Japanese anime? This idea that they're clearly white, for me, it's just like, okay, in your eyes, to you.
The latter of which has sparked concerns of racism among players in indigenous communities. The petition further declares, cultural appropriation and whitewashing perpetuate harmful stereotypes and diminish the rich cultural heritage of indigenous communities.
How do they perpetuate harmful stereotypes? Because they're literally not, like, conforming to any of the stereotypes, because they're just taking inspiration for potentially the setting and maybe some names of some individuals and then just fantasizing it. Like, in my opinion, that removes any idea of all of the potential stereotypes that people could think are there. Am I wrong in that? I think if you look at, like, I don't know, let's just say you look at something based in European history and then you fantasize it and it's totally abstract from the real history, I don't understand where the harmful stereotypes come from there, unless, I don't know, you've got some dude who talks like this and he's got really bad teeth. I don't know.
These practices not only misrepresent cultures, but also contribute to ongoing marginalization and disrespect. It then lists demands. Hoyo to get, yes, this is where they want them to get the sweet.
Sire, I can't eat the meat. My teeth have fallen out and my gums are soft.
Baby ink treatment. Talk to companies like Sweet Baby Inc. And if you don't know about that, oh my goodness, Sweet Baby Inc. has been responsible for the failure of some games with massive budgets that tanked because of Sweet Baby Inc.'s woke consultation and involvement.
The thing is as well, though, we've got to stop putting it all onto Sweet Baby Inc. Don't get me wrong, they are like what seems to be almost like a tumor in the gaming industry. But at the same time, let's not take all the blame away from the people within the publishers and the developers who are making the decisions to allow this consultation to really change things that they'd originally created. Now, it's one thing if they've created something and, you know, Sweet Baby Inc. come in and go, well, that's fine, whatever. And I understand that Sweet Baby Inc. are trying to change things in video games, but they're allowing those things to be changed. Even if it's under threat of, oh, we're going to bring mobs down on you. Because I know there was that speech from the one who, I don't know if she was like the co-founder of Sweet Baby Inc. or the CEO or whatever she is, that she was, you know, she basically alluded to them kind of coercing companies to be involved with them because, you know, the communities would bring, you know, them into disrepute in terms of their reputation and stuff. That's still on the developer and the publisher to say, well, okay, we're just going to not listen to you, though, because at the end of the day, we're making a product that we want our consumers to enjoy. And if those people get mad about it, then let them be mad kind of thing.
All right. So, yeah, they want to do all this stuff. In addition to this petition, an X account called HYV Boycott also declares, I think it's safe to say that We have all had enough of the erasure of our cultures and identities. Today, I introduce you all to Boycott Hoyoverse. We will be an account sharing how you can boycott. Spread the word. Anything helps.
And you know what I found as well? A lot of these people who talk about erasure of their culture and their identities typically are people that have a history linked to a particular culture, but they live in the West and they don't practice any of the culture that they claim is being erased at all. They become very westernized. They become very, you know, commercial centric, live their life in that way. But then they talk about erasure of their culture. And then when you tend to see people who are actually from these cultures, now I'm generalizing a little bit here, and this is anecdotal from things I've seen, when you tend to see people that are actually from those places and from those cultures, tend to be kind of happy that their culture's even getting represented, even if it's in a entirely fantastical way and doesn't actually really represent the culture, but it's inspired by it. They're just like, dude, this is kind of cool, because that's kind of how I feel. And obviously, I suppose, being British, we get the privilege that there's been many fantasy works based on Britain because of just the history of Britain, you know, and Europe in general in that regards. But when I see, you know, when I start watching an anime and I see, oh, you know, there's just little things in the anime that you can tell is inspired by British history and British culture and historical moments and people, or things that have happened in British history, and they've made it into like this total fantasy version of it. I'm like, dude, that's cool, man, in my opinion, because it's like, hey, that's like, oh, that place, they're talking about a place that's not far up the road from me, and this has been made into a Japanese anime, and I just think that's kind of cool. And I suppose, I guess it's a little bit different because I suppose you get overrepresented in that degree, and I know that'd be an argument. But I just always find that a lot of these people that say this sort of stuff have lost all links to their own culture anyway, because they've chose to just live in a Western-style culture, but then when they see their culture being used, it angers them, and it's like, you don't even really care about your own culture, really, do you?
Then don't play this game. Play a game that represents your culture if you can only play games that represent your culture, which is stupid, but...
It's an anime game, it's not based on real life, I think they need to chill. Exactly. That's the thing, it's not that deep. That's all you really need to say to these people. It's not that deep. Just don't play it if you don't like it.
Like, it doesn't have to be this boycott.
But you're gonna, ain't ya? Because you're addicted. You're addicted to the gamba.
Play what you like, and all this
you want the
stuff
big titty
that
waifus.
does do what you want them to do,
you can't
especially
help
for
it.
the sake of it, they're failing. So you might need to help them. Might need to help them out with their games. Support their stuff, because as we've seen as a trend, doesn't do so well. It's not doing so well. All of the DEI, Sweet Baby Inc. stuff, not faring well at all. The account adds, there has been a distinct lack of darker skin tones represented in the game. Characters from these cultures are actively being heavily referenced, but are being whitewashed. This is especially noticeable in and ever present in not only Sumeru and Natlan, but also in other nations. These practices not only misrepresent said cultures, but also...
It's not their duty to represent that said culture, though, you know? And I don't think there's any duty upon anybody creating a fictional world that if they're inspired by anything, they have to represent it. That's, in my opinion, that's not how it works. Like, if you want to create a fantasy world, that's the whole point. It's fantasy. And if you want to take a historical version, or you're inspired by any individual culture, country, whatever, and make it totally different, that's fine as well at the end of the day, because it's fantasy. It's not real.
Also contribute to the ongoing marginalization and disrespect that is perpetuating colorism further in the media, causing even more harm than good to communities and groups of individuals who are a part of them, the account stated. Several voice actors have also voiced their support for the boycott. And Yatko, who voices Raiden Shogun in Genshin Impact, posted, I really hope that a video game company listens to its fan base when valid criticism is made multiple years in a row about the execution of its
Hey, listen, they can't even get rid of the shitty stamina bar and sort the dailies out, you know? And that's a genuine criticism about the game, and they ain't fixed that. You think they're gonna fucking listen to this shit? Come on, man.
Research and inclusion of elements / aspects of other cultures. Here's the thing about voice actors is a lot of them are very woke, but then there's some of them who aren't, that have to stay quiet. Because voice actors especially, they be getting canceled.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just voice actors. I think if you work in any form of entertainment nowadays, you have to toe the line, don't you? Because, like, again, I don't like to turn this into left versus right, but we all know, it doesn't matter what side of politics you're on, really. We all understand where Western media in general, from films to TV to newspapers to whatever it might be, kind of sits. There's a reason why the internet, in regards to individuals creating news and creating these sort of this sort of content, does so well, because it's kind of the lone voice against the cacophony of a one-sided conversation. So of course people who choose to work in that space do have to be quiet, and I don't judge them at all for it, because they've got bills to pay and they might have mouths to feed, and they're not going to speak out against the people who are paying them. Of course, I would never expect them to be fair, but yeah, she's definitely right on that.
Happens. So yeah, a lot of them feel like they have to be quiet, or you have this vocal one here with on the woke brigade, right? And you see these 24,000 likes. See all of this 6,000 likes here and stuff, but does this actually translate? Not really. Whenever you're seeing actual success.
You can't use Twitter as any sort of base with this stuff as well, because let's face it, Twitter's just a cesspit of perpetually angry people on all walks of life. You know, I keep saying it's like Twitter's where like the last few brain cells go to fight it out to the death. You know, 90% of the people who are interacting with this probably don't even play video games, let alone play Genshin.
Success for this company. Albedo voice actor Koi Dao also shared on X, if a game draws so heavily from real-world cultures and bases a character on the supreme deity of Yoruba religion, and that character ends up looking like pale Sasuke Batman, people are absolutely within their rights to demand better representation, especially when said game has a clearly stated commitment to a global.
And I guarantee you all of these people wouldn't get offended at all of the different interpretations of the Judeo-Christian God, and this is coming from somebody who's not religious, the Judeo-Christian God in all works of fantasy. Like, dude, have you seen some of the creative works that people create about, you know, angels and God, and some of them are seriously badass as well, but people who are of extreme religious faith, who are really fervently religious and are Christians, would probably find them highly offensive, but you know, that happens. So, like, let's stop pretending that that's not something that happens across the, well, it doesn't happen across the board, but definitely when it comes to Christianity, that gets creatively mocked quite regularly, actually.
Global audience. He added, I hope y'all keep making, make your voices heard, and I hope they listen. Dude, that's the thing, though, is nobody is thinking that Genshin Impact.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I agree with that. You know, it's hard to get into the industry, but at the same time, if you are going to be incredibly vocal about the place you're working for and it affects you to that level, it's like, well, you know, find some, because like you say, come and work in Western companies, you'll find plenty of that space. But I understand, and you should be able to criticize your boss. You should be able to criticize your boss, definitely. But I think there's so many people who are like, they're almost like champagne socialists in a sense of that they want to complain about the thing, but they'll happily cash a check from the thing. Which again, I don't have an issue with, but I just think sometimes people really try to plant themselves in this really virtuistic position, and they're not really that morally superior to anybody else. You know?
Is trying
that
to
makes
be
sense.
Realistic. Nobody thinks Genshin Impact is a historically accurate game. It doesn't.
But I agree with that. If it does bother you that much, then just go work somewhere else. You know, if it's that important to your morals, you know, so there's always that option too. Hey, Gremlin.
Doesn't pretend to be. Let Genshin Impact have their characters look how they want to have them. The boycott and these actors' complaints seem to have had little to no impact in Hoyo versus revenue. According to gacha revenue, Zenless Zone Zero generated $68.8 million from Chinese players and another $31 million from its global base in July, totaling
still absolutely insane. Like, don't get me wrong, I expected Zenless to be a success. I said from the start, when everybody was really divided about it, I said, in my opinion, it's definitely not the best Hoyo game. and it's like a 6 out of 10, but it's lots of fun. But it is going to do very well. It's going to be in the top 10 for the foreseeable future, and it's going to be regularly in the top 5, if not staying in the top 5 for the foreseeable future, and probably dropping out here and there when there's lulls in content and other games are dropping big banger updates. That they'll, you know, there'll be that sort of rotation, but it'll always be up there with the most successful games now.
99.8 million.
Unless they really screw the
Rail
pooch.
Earned $21 million from its global player base and another $19.3 million from China, making a total of $40.3 million. This is a decrease from June when the game earned $35 million globally and $60 million in China, totaling $95.5 million. As for Genshin Impact, it grossed $19.3 million in China and another $18 million globally, totaling $30.
And I've heard some people talking about the drop in Genshin, because it has had a drop, saying that that's to do with the boycott. They're making it, there's some sort of relevancy there, where, hey, there might be a small percent, but the reason why Genshin and Honkai's had a reduction in its revenue as well is because a lot of those people who are spending on those have just rotated into Zenless to spend on that in launch. You know, that's all that's happened. That's why Zenless has had such a massive spike and they've come down. It's because a big chunk of the low spenders and the whales have just moved across into the other Hoyo game.
$37.3 million. This is also a decrease from June when it grossed $38.5 million in China and $29 million globally, totaling $67.5 million. All right, so while Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact saw a drop, Zenless Zone Zero offset this decline combined. See, this probably has a lot to do with it, as well as a lot of these players of these other games are hopping on Zenless Zone Zero. Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact saw their revenue fall by $85.4 million. However, as mentioned earlier, Zenless Zone Zero pulled in nearly $100 million in its first month. Overall, with Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, Hoyoverse grossed $163 million in June. In July, between...
So overall that's an 8.8% increase in revenue from month to month. So no matter what happened, there definitely was any impact from the boycotts. They actually increased the revenue. Not only did the people rotate into Zenless, but more people spent it anyway overall.
Between Zenless Zone Zero, Genshin Impact, and Honkai Star Rail, Hoyoverse grossed $177.4 million. That's an 8.8% increase in revenue from month to month. This is also an increase from May when Honkai Star Rail grossed $55 million in China and another $36 million globally for a total of $91 million. Genshin Impact grossed $30.3 million in China and another $23 million.
Well, that makes sense. It's going to be increased from them because now they've got 3 games instead of 2, haven't they? Even though those games have like had a drop in their revenue, and Genshin's is continually going down, I would say anyway. You know, I'm not 100% sure that if it's been linear, but I think it's starting to taper down just because the game's been out for 4 years now and there's a lot more competition. But they've got 3 games now instead of 2, haven't they? So overall, the revenue, it's not a shock that it's gone up.
Globally for a total of $53.3 million. Combined, the 2 games grossed $144 million in May. July's grosses are 23% higher than May's. What do you make of Hoyoverse's? All right, so anyway, yeah, there's that. Honestly, Genshin Impact.
They're printing cash. That's what I make of that. Hoyoverse continue to freaking print cash. They're laughing. They're looking at all this stuff and going, boys, we're getting rich, baby. You know? It's like, they don't care.
Really fun. But what keeps me from playing Genshin Impact isn't that characters are too white. It's what keeps me from playing it as much as I don't like having to play as set characters. I wanted to create my own character and get
stamina.
It's literally the only thing that keeps me from playing it right now.
Dailies.
But yeah, anyway, I can tell you one thing, and what all of these activists want is they also are constantly pioneering for the uglification of characters, as we've seen happen a ton in the West. And I can tell you that because that's the thing, is there's always this, oh, you're objectifying this character if they make them too cute. So if they start, you know, okay, let's make some of our characters more brown, more tan, more black, this, that, and the other, then if they're too cute, it's going to be, oh no, you're objectifying this character. And so what we constantly see with games right now.
End of the day, with certain parts of the internet, vocal parts of it, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I'm not saying that everybody feels that way. Again, I genuinely understand people wanting representation in games and in IP. People want to see themselves in stuff. I get that, you know. And I suppose living in the West, when it comes to like films and games and stuff, you know, I've had that ability that I get that. But I also don't care about seeing myself in a character. And I know some people will argue that, well, that's because you see it all the time. But I don't really, because most of the characters in my favourite stuff are characters that really aren't realistic in a way, because they're either like super powerful beings or they're just really, really like unbelievably, I guess, almost sinless characters. And you can see, you can hope to be the better parts of those characters, but you're not represented anyway, because they're not realistic representations of human beings, let alone any particular group of human beings. But you're just damned if you do and damned if you don't with certain sections of the internet, because it doesn't matter where you go or what you do, they're gonna be offended or annoyed by something. And going back to what you said as well, Nine, I agree with that. At the end of the day, they are going to use different cultures and regions as more of just a canvas, really, aren't they? It's not to represent that culture. It's that those things look kind of cool and it's different from this thing. Let's use that to create this new nation. And maybe we'll even pick some sort of individuals from history, maybe, and we'll create a character out of that. Like, it's like, let's face it, Egypt has been a massive base for a lot of people when it creating fantasy works, as an, you know, you think of a lot of different fantasy works, games, whatever it might be, big universes where they're creating different cultures and they're adding stuff all the time, whether it might be like a games, a tabletop game to a card game to a video game or whatever. Usually something that's kind of based on Egyptian mythology kind of slips in there, doesn't it? And at the end of the day, you don't need to necessarily represent Egypt itself. It's just using that as a canvas to create something magical. And I think like certain cultures have really cool history that really lends itself to creating those things, doesn't it? And to me personally, again, this is why I almost feel like, not pride, because I never was involved in it, but you know, when stuff's based on UK history, I'm like, that dude, that's cool. That's just up the road, that is. And I get it, because we've got like a rich, cool history over thousands of years. And it's, of course, it's going to be used because it's interesting, isn't it? And I think as people educate themselves more on different parts of the world that are not necessarily well known to people, they're going to start to be used more, because it's like, oh, this story or this, people don't know about this particular culture, but there's some really cool things. But I don't want to actually like write a biography on the culture. I just want to use some of the things that have happened in their history as a way to create some fantasy stuff, because it looks cool, like.
In the West, there's the uglification of characters, including whenever they do add...
I gotta say though, man, she's got some awesome tattoos as well.
Diverse cast. For some reason, they make they want to make them as ugly as possible. It's really weird. So I can tell you one thing, these games would be a colossal failure if they implemented those strategies and started uglifying their characters. But hey, looks like they're doing pretty good. They definitely don't need to be listening or paying any attention to this stupid boycott that's not really doing anything. So anyway, there you have it for...
Well, they haven't listened, and neither of the people playing the game either. That's evident in terms of how much revenue Hoyo are making. So at the end of the day, nobody's listened. And I bet probably a big majority of the people who were involved in the annoyance around the boycott and who said they were going to boycott the game didn't listen either and went on to continue playing the game as well. But yeah, good video. Melanie Mac Go Boom dropped her a sub. I have to check some other videos as well. But yeah, it was evident that it was going to fail, wasn't it? I don't think anybody really genuinely thought that it was gonna make a big difference. Let's face it, Genshin players and fans have been calling for many changes within the game for years now, and changes that fundamentally would improve the game without impacting any revenue or annoying any other regions of Hoyo's fan base, and they still haven't done those things. So this was never going to happen, was it really? It was never going to happen.